Good afternoon, everyone. Hi, I'm Liz Krueger, State Senator and host of this afternoon's event. I feel like the last couple of weeks I'm spending every afternoon or a part of it with my constituents on these very important webinars that have been proved to be incredibly valuable and appreciated based on the number of people who are signing up and the feedback we get. So I'm delighted to welcome you to the third part of our virtual older adults resource fair. This is our last session, and it's on legal resources. You might be on via Zoom or by Facebook Live. As always, we have closed captioning available for this afternoon's event. Please know you can turn on your closed captioning in the following ways. If you're on Zoom, click on the live transcript in the meeting controls to start viewing closed captioning. And if you're on Facebook Live, you'll see a button on the bottom right-hand corner of your video. Click on CC for closed caption to activate the process. We have found that for people with even limited hearing loss, there's a real value to being able to read along as you're listening. It helps you absorb the information. But as always, our session is being recorded, and everyone who RSVP'd today will receive an email link in the next couple of days, which will include the video of this whole Zoom, the resource lists that are posted in the chat within the chat, and also presenters' PowerPoints. So don't feel like you have to busily scribble everything down that you're hearing and every phone number, because we're going to send it all to you. So really just take a deep breath and you'll learn a lot of things, and you will have an opportunity to think about them and follow through in a few days. My office, like every elected's office, receives many calls from older adults seeking referrals to attorneys who can assist with an array of civil legal matters, including creating later life documents and assistance with benefits. The truth is, we're not an attorney referral service. And in fact, there's a reason we probably don't refer people to any individual attorneys, but we do help you find sources of where you can find attorneys. So that's exactly what you're going to be learning today. Who is out there and how can they help? We'll be hearing from organizations providing expert and affordable legal services. These programs have different income limit criteria, so not all of them may be right for you. Our first presenter will be Elisa Tustian, Director of the Senior Law Project at Volunteers for Legal Services, known as VOLS. Then she will be followed by a team of speakers: Rebecca Wallach, Director of the Evelyn Frank Legal Resource Program, and Erin Shahinfar. I should have learned how to pronounce that earlier. Staff attorney for Advanced Planning Practice and Public Benefits Resource Program, who are from the New York Legal Assistance Group. And the NYLAG team will talk about a menu of legal services focused on older adult civil matters, including assistance of benefits, healthcare, and probate court. Following the NYLAG team, Libby Vasquez, the Director of Legal Services, and many other titles with the City Bar Justice Center, will share information about their offerings and the legal referral hotline at the New York City Bar Association, followed by Michele Kirschbaum, Director of Programs at the New York Peace Institute, which offers voluntary mediation services between and among family members, neighbors, and if all the parties agree, even tenant and building managers. So I'm going to start off by introducing Elisa. Then after she presents, she will be introducing the next presenter, et cetera, till we get to the part of the program for questions and answers. We have gotten quite a few questions in advance, but if you have additional questions that come to you during the Zoom presentations, you can write those questions into the Q&A section of your software system. And if we have a chance to get to those questions, we will do our best as well. And there's a possibility someone might even answer the question that you've written during the Zoom. So with that, I'm going to introduce Elisa and go off camera myself. Good afternoon, Elisa.
Good afternoon. I'm going to attempt to share my screen while I start here. And of course, now I'm not seeing the presentation slides. So I'm from Volunteers of Legal Service. As I open up these slides, I'll tell you a little bit about our organization. Our organization is a pro bono first organization, which means that we try to connect folks to the large international law firms throughout New York City to help them get their life planning documents. Okay, so now I should be able to try to share again. And I should see it. There it is. Okay, I'm going to share and put onto slide view. There we are. Did that work? Are you all seeing slide view? Hopefully.
Yes.
We are not seeing the slide view.
All right, we're seeing the general view.
It should work this time. Let's see. There we are. So you see it now?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. Thank you for your patience. So what we're going to focus on today is a little bit about our general program, but also just 2 documents that you can actually do without an attorney that are available publicly. And that's why we call this slide series our Empowering Older Adults slide series. So Volunteers of Legal Service was founded in the 1980s. Like I said, we focus on connecting people to law firms and corporations to get them attorneys. We have various projects that you can look into on our website, and I am with the Senior Law Project, so that's why we're here today. Our project is an estates project. We're estates attorneys, and we're focusing on last will and testament, power of attorney, healthcare proxy, living will, and control of remains. We serve those over 60 in all 5 boroughs, and our particular project is low income and limited resource based, so it may not apply to all of you, and that's why I wanted to focus on the 2 documents that will be publicly available to all of you. Generally, people know what a last will and testament is, to leave things after they die, and people know what a power of attorney is because that's where you're sharing your power while you're still alive. So that in case you become ill and are not able to do your financial transactions for yourself, that's already in place, and then it avoids guardianship for your loved ones who might be taking care of you at that time. So we can go through a little bit about each document. The way we structure our talks is usually planning for incapacity and planning for death. Planning for incapacity, you're going to see that durable power of attorney, you're going to see a healthcare proxy, which we're going to talk about in detail, and you're going to see a living will, which is also health related. Then you're going to see documents that are for about planning for death, that's your last will and testament, and the control of disposition of remains. So with a power of attorney, if you don't have a power of attorney in place, then you end up in the hospital for a few months and you can't pay a utility bill or sign a lease. Or your medical situation becomes even worse, and you might be looking at your loved ones having to go to the court and ask for guardianship, which is a more cumbersome process than getting a power of attorney. With a healthcare proxy, if you don't have one, there is a statute in place that will look to your closest relatives in priority order that is listed in the statute, and so they will find someone to make those medical decisions. In a living will, you don't have to name someone. It's your way. It's one of the ways you can let your doctor know how you feel about treatment at the end of your life and certain machinery and artificial treatments that are really important. So for example, everybody has different...
Pardon me, Elisa, could you please just speak a little louder and closer to the microphone?
Oh, sure. Let me move this computer up a little bit. So the living will can sometimes be confused with the last will and testament, but we don't want you to confuse them. Just think of the living will as part of your medical decisions while you're still living, and the last will and testament for after you die. There's your last will and testament. If you die without a will, there is a statute once again that's gonna say who your closest kin are and how they will receive. If you do die with a will, you can have a lot more control. And you can say who receives, even if they're not your kin. And then your disposition of remains is actually who retrieves your remains from the hospital maybe, or if you've made donations from whatever services you've done the donation with, which might likely also be a hospital. So let's focus here on the healthcare proxy first. So a New York healthcare proxy allows you to appoint someone you trust, a family member or close friend, for example, to make healthcare decisions for you if you lose the ability to make these decisions for yourself. It's very important that folks understand that having a healthcare proxy doesn't mean that a medical professional can look over you at your medical appointments currently and look to your proxy to make those decisions. While you're able to make the decisions for yourself, you should be making those decisions yourself. No one should be speaking over you at appointments or anything like that, or calling your healthcare proxy to make those decisions for you. This is something that should only kick in once you cannot make the decisions yourself and there's been a medical determination of that by your medical professionals. You do need 2 witnesses to sign this document. You do not need a notary, and you do not need an attorney. Hospitals, doctors, and other healthcare providers must follow your decisions, as we've just said. You may give the person you select as a healthcare agent as little or as much authority as you want. You can limit it within your form. And then we're going to have a look at the state websites. So these websites are where you can find the healthcare proxy. The government has made this available to you. You do not need to pay for this, and you can update it as much as you like. The last one dated will be the one that counts. So if you have one in place and you want to make a new one, you can get this form from the state website, fill it in, and then distribute it to your doctors, and that will replace whichever older one you have. This is what it looks like. You'll see it when you go to the website that it has a place to put your name, and then the name, address, and telephone number of the person that you're appointing. You're then going to name an alternate agent if you wish. You may name more than one alternate agent if you wish to amend the form, but just keep in mind that only one agent can serve at a time. So it would be the original agent, first alternate agent, or second alternate agent. We cannot have situations where we're asking both our adult children to serve at the same time to spare any feelings, because as you can imagine, that could cause an argument between them and delay decisions. So only one agent at a time, please. So you can select for your healthcare proxy to remain valid indefinitely unless you set an expiration date. Some people want to set an expiration date, like they want this healthcare proxy only for a certain operation, and some people want instead for it to not expire. So that is your choice. You can also specify limitations. You can put in general language, like you've discussed your wishes with your healthcare agent and alternate agent. You want to discuss those important criteria, for example, artificial nutrition and hydration. These are the types of things that are usually important to yourself and your medical care provider to make clear. So this is what it will look like on the form. And you're going to fill in those wishes. You're going to sign, date, put your name and address on your form. If you would like to make donations clear on this form, you have the option to do so. It's going to ask if you'd like to donate any organs, eyes, or tissues, or if you'd like to make limitations. Sometimes folks don't want to do this. This is optional, so you can skip this section, or you may put in the limitations that you wish, that you do not wish to make any anatomical gifts, and that's fine. You're going to have 2 witnesses over the age of 18 that are not named in your document. So they should not be named as your agent, alternate agent, or second alternate agent if you're amending the form. And then they are going to sign and date that they have watched you sign, that you signed of your own free will, that no one forced you to sign, and that you appeared of sound mind while you were signing. Okay. So if for some reason you have to direct someone to sign, the statute does allow that. If you have a question about that, you could always call into VOLS. So the agent and alternate agent's phone numbers are required so that they can be contacted immediately and directly. And as we discussed, there's only one agent at a time on this form, and you should give copies to your healthcare professionals. The other document that you can do without an attorney is the control of remains. In New York, there is a form available publicly, and in that form you can fill in who you would like to have permission to sign for your remains. You do not need an attorney, you just need 2 witnesses, you do not need a notary. If you go to health.ny.gov, you're going to see this form available under the Department of Health. It's called Disposition of Remains. You're going to click on the PDF, and this is what it's going to look like when you go to it. You're going to fill in your name and address. You're going to put in any special directions that you have. Sometimes people have specific wishes in terms of cremation or burial, or even more specific wishes about where they would like their ashes to be distributed that they may list here. You may indicate whether you have any pre-funded, pre-need agreements with funeral homes so that your agents know who to contact for those pre-funded arrangements. Then you put your agent's name and address and telephone number. And you can put a first successor and second successor are optional here. You can also put in, it has a set duration. It has this duration here that is set because it becomes effective upon your death, because there's no reason to use it right while you're alive. Then the person who is accepting the appointment then signs and dates, and then you have the witnesses signing as well. Okay. So this here, pardon me, is your signature. So this is you. If you need to revoke any prior appointments, you can do that here. Then you have the witnesses, and then down below, that's the final part, is the acceptance. Okay, so that's what it's going to look like. And I think I sped through a little bit. How am I doing on time? Let's see here.
You have 1 more minute.
Okay, great. Okay, so if people have specific questions about how to get these, you're going to receive the slideshow, and you'll have the links there. The main thing that we wanted you to understand is that whether you're eligible for our services or not, these forms are publicly available to you. And so you should go onto the website, explore these forms, digest them, and think about how they might be useful to you if you might have an operation coming up, or if you don't have a healthcare proxy in place, or if you would like to update your healthcare proxy. And also the disposition of remains is often useful if you don't have any family, any close family in New York, and you want to name a friend or neighbor to take care of your remains, so that when the time comes, the hospital, the government isn't running around sort of looking for someone in another country or very far away, which we have seen happen. Okay, so now I'm going to introduce the next speaker. That is Rebecca Wallace, the director of the Evelyn Frank Legal Resources Program at NYLAG, and Erin Shahinfar, who is a staff attorney in the Advanced Planning Practice and Public Benefits Resource Program. Thank you very much for your time. I hope you could hear me okay.
Thank you, Elisa. All right. We are ready to get started, switching gears a little bit, and very pleased to be here with so many of you who are seeking out this important information that may be of use to you or your neighbors, or others in your community. So I'm Rebecca Wallach. I'm the director of the Evelyn Frank Legal Resources Program at NYLAG. NYLAG, New York Legal Assistance Group, is a leading civil legal services organization. Our services include comprehensive free civil legal services, financial empowerment, impact litigation, policy advocacy, and community partnerships. We have a staff of about 400, and last year we reached over 130,000 people. We have many different units and projects that may be of interest to you, but we're only going to have time to speak about 3 of them today. The first one is my unit, the Evelyn Frank Legal Resources Program. It may not be clear necessarily from the name, but our focus and our aim is on healthcare access for older adults and people with disabilities. We work to ensure that our clients have access to affordable healthcare that covers their doctors and their services. And also we have a focus on Medicaid home care services so that we can age safely in our homes and in the community. How do we do this? In a couple of different ways. We have a couple of different services that sort of actually is the direct representation that we do for clients and for New Yorkers. The first piece is a typical kind of elder services type of law. Our paralegals and attorneys are your counselor. We're counseling you on your Medicare eligibility. We just got out of open enrollment where many of us received all kinds of information about different Medicare products in the mail. There were commercials on television, and our Medicare program is complex, it's confusing. We are a resource to find the best healthcare coverage for you that covers your medications, makes it so you can see your doctors and specialists, and also we screen you for possible eligibility for different public benefits that can make that Medicare service more affordable. It might be a program like EPIC, which is run by our state and reduces prescription drug costs, or the Medicare Savings Program, which also reduces prescription drug costs but puts money in your pocket. And for some clients too, we can look to Medicaid to save money on our Medicare costs. Another type of navigation and counseling that we provide is eligibility for Medicaid for home care services. As we age, many of us start to need different types of assistance to stay in the community. Some of us receive that assistance with bathing or walking or shopping, housekeeping from friends and family. Some of us need to look to pay for those services. Those services are very expensive, and in our country, the only health insurance that covers long-term care is Medicaid. So we do counsel on financial eligibility and other pieces of eligibility for Medicaid home care for the purposes of obtaining home care. And then after our clients who are eligible obtain home care, we can help navigate through a really complex, convoluted system to actually get those services provided by the Medicaid program in an adequate number of hours. Another piece of what we do is representing clients directly in adversarial situations where maybe it was the Human Resources Administration, which is our city agency that oversees our Medicaid program, improperly denied your eligibility for Medicaid or MSP, or they discontinued your enrollment in Medicaid or MSP. We take these cases. If we need to go to a fair hearing, we do, or we have ways to advocate directly with the city department to fix the problem and to make sure that you have the health insurance that you need. Similarly, we represent clients in Medicaid managed care denials of services. So our Medicaid program is most people who are enrolled in Medicaid receive some or all of their services through a managed care program. That's a private insurance company that oversees our public benefit. And there's an appeals process if there's a denial or a reduction in a needed medical service. And we will represent in appeals, fair hearings, or external appeals to obtain medically necessary services for our clients. In addition, we have a website that we run with other legal services groups that really dives deep into the wonky eligibility rules of Medicaid. But if you're a person who really wants to understand Medicaid for older adults and people with disabilities and other issues related to healthcare access, I encourage you to jump into this website. It will have more information than you possibly could need in most instances. And how do you reach out to us? If you have an inquiry, we have a hotline that's open on Mondays between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. That phone number is 212-613-7310. And we also have an email intake, which is open Mondays through Fridays. I would say, the next 2 weeks, we're going to have very limited to no capacity as many people start to go on vacation, but we'll be fully up and running in the new year. If you're very interested in this topic, I encourage you to join our newsletter. We send out updates that may be of interest to you or your community members. And that sort of wraps up the piece on my unit. I'm stepping in for Nick Shugar here on the Family Care Abuse and Prevention Initiative. She was unfortunately unable to make it, but she's an almost attorney. She's waiting for admission after passing the bar at NYLAG, who's focused on this multi-agency project that provides social and legal support to older adults and their caregivers to help stem abuse, neglect, and exploitation. So doing some just general level setting here and trying to understand what is elder abuse. We have two different definitions up here, one from the Older Americans Act and another from the National Center on Elder Abuse. The big takeaway is that there's not one definition of what elder abuse might be, but we can sort of start to understand a little bit about what it means. First, it's unfortunately prevalent. 1 in 10 older adults will experience abuse in their lifetimes. This could take on a variety of types, right? It could be physical or sexual abuse, psychological, neglect, or financial exploitation. Financial exploitation is by far the most common. And unfortunately, in most cases, 60% from this slide, the abuser is a family member, although some of it does occur in nursing homes. The risk factors are social isolation and mental impairment. But what's important to remember is that abuse happens across, it impacts any and all older adults could be impacted. All races, backgrounds, and socioeconomic levels may be impacted by this type of abuse. There are certain red flags that may indicate abuse is happening, changes in routine or behavior, confusion about finances, unexplained injuries, more isolation, like a family member not allowing you to see another family member, and things along those lines. So what Nick's program is really trying to do is to prevent abuse from occurring in the first place. And one way that she does this is by those advanced planning documents that Elisa was just talking about. So making sure that you have in place exactly who you want to be your healthcare proxy, who you would want, we didn't talk about powers of attorney in depth, but who you would want to be your agent in the event that you could no longer make decisions on yourself, protecting your assets and wills and trusts, or at least getting some information about guardianship. We're not able to do a great deal of high level of representation in those cases. She also helps with similar issues to what I was just discussing that we do in the Evelyn Frank Legal Resources Program. Can she help navigate assisting an older adult in accessing home care? And that's going to relieve some of the stress that a caregiver might be feeling. She, when necessary, can go to family court and get an order of protection to make sure an older adult is protected from an abusive family member or caregiver, to make sure that that person can no longer interact with the person experiencing the abuse. And she has a couple other services as well, questions and advice on consumer rights and fraud, some limited housing related advocacy, and some nursing home advocacy. To reach her, you want to go through our general intake number, which is 212-613-5000. And so with that, I will continue sharing my slides, but pass it over to Erin.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. Um, okay, so I'm a staff attorney in the advanced planning practice. My name's Erin Shahinfar, and I think we can go to the next slide, please. Okay, so just a quick overview of the advanced planning practice at NYLAG. So we do life planning, wills, powers of attorney, healthcare proxies, living wills. We also work on guardianship issues. We do full representation for 17A guardianship. And we do advice and counsel on Article 81 guardianship. Article 81 is the guardianship. It's created in Supreme Court, and it is typically pursued when like an older adult has had memory loss, or they like have a diagnosis of Alzheimer's or something that develops that has caused them to lose capacity after the age of 22. We also do some advice and limited representation on estates issues, and those are non-contested estates matters. And then we do a little bit of elder abuse prevention. And we have income and asset guidelines. We're not able to, in terms of our income, we're 250% of the federal poverty level. And I've listed the amounts there. And then for assets, it's about $40,000 for a household of one and $60,000 for a household of two. Okay, next slide. Thank you. So if you want to get in touch with us, if you have an issue in one of these areas, you can reach us via email at lifeplanning@nylag.org or at 212-613-6514. And as Rebecca mentioned, we have, because of the holidays for the next couple of weeks, we have we're not doing as many intakes as we typically would, but we'll be back after the new year. Okay. And then I'm going to kind of do a little flyover of some of the world of probate. And this is my disclaimer, this is not legal advice. This is public information. If you need legal advice, you'll have to contact us or another attorney for tailored advice. Okay, we can go to the next slide. So what is estate, probate, and administration? Probate and administration, these are the processes here in New York State for managing a deceased person's assets in their name only. You pay their debts, and then you distribute the remainder to either the heirs set out at law or the beneficiaries named in a will. So here in New York, if there's a will, you're going through probate. If there is no will, you're going through administration. Next slide, please. So what is a will? Elisa touched on this, so I won't linger too long, but basically it's a legal document that lets a person set out who they want to receive their property when they pass away. Why would you want to make this? There's a number of reasons. Control, for one. You can choose who gets your belongings and in what amounts. You can also make contingency plans. So like if a beneficiary develops a disability or something like that, you can come up with a plan B. You can also pick a person to be in charge of wrapping up your estate. And you can also set up certain ways to hold property for minors or for people with disabilities. And a will can be very useful for avoiding tangled title. Tangled title can occur when there's like many people who have an interest in a piece of property, and there's kind of like successive generations where no probate or administration happened. And it can be very complicated to insure a property or figure out or sell it. Okay, we can go to the next slide. So what happens if you don't make a will? If you don't make a will, there is state law that sets out who will receive your property. This is called the law of intestacy. If you have a spouse and no children, then all of your property would go to your spouse. If you have a spouse and children, the first $50,000 plus 1/2 of the balance goes to the spouse, and the the first $50,000 plus 1/2 of the remaining money goes to the spouse, and then the balance goes to the children in equal shares. And the only other one that I'll go, and it goes on and on, so on and so forth. But those are kind of the most common examples. Basically, the state is looking for your next of kin. Okay, we can go to the next slide. So if you pass away and you don't have a will, then there is also default state law that says who has priority to be appointed what's called administrator, the person in charge of your estate. The person with top priority is the surviving spouse. If there is no surviving spouse, then it's, the children. If you have any surviving children, they all have equal priority. If there's no children, then grandchildren. No grandchildren, then parents, and so on and so forth, like moving further out in the family tree, looking for, again, like that next of kin. Okay, we can go to the next slide. It's important to know that there are certain assets that pass outside of a will. So these are things that don't go through surrogate's court when you die. They pass outside of a will. They don't go through administration. This is called non-probate property. And here are some really, really common examples. So a life insurance policy with a designated beneficiary passes outside of a will. A pension or retirement plan with a designated beneficiary. A payable on death, transfer on death, or taught in trust bank account. These are all payable on death, transfer on death, taught in trust. These are like synonyms, basically. It's just a bank account where there's a beneficiary, or it will say in trust for, and then there's, another name. Joint bank accounts, depending on what the agreement was when the account was opened, those might also be non-probate property. Property held jointly with a right of survivorship. The new transfer on death deeds, excuse me, and trusts. All of these things pass outside of wills. Things that are typically, passing under a will or passing through the administration process are cash, tangible personal property, so like furniture, jewelry, antiques, anything that somebody might own in their apartment. And then bank accounts, investments, stocks and bonds, or real property like a house or an apartment or anything like that, held solely in the name of the person who passed away. Those things are going to be subject to probate or administration. Okay, next slide. When somebody passes away, it may be possible to collect their property using what's called 1310 affidavits. These let relatives or creditors gather certain assets without going to court. It's an affidavit, so it's a sworn statement, and generally you'll have to present the affidavit, the death certificate, and you may have to submit something called an heirship affidavit, which just talks about like your family tree. And you would have to present this to a bank or whoever has this property that you're trying to collect. You can only use this affidavit if no administrator or executor has been appointed. So there's basically no case in surrogate's court yet. No will has gone to court. No administration case is opened. It has to be signed in front of a notary, and third parties are not required to accept these. So that is one drawback. Although I would say from personal experience, banks frequently accept these. And if an administrator or an executor is later appointed and requests money back, the recipient may have to give to the administrator or the executor. Okay, and there's a link as well, which should be dropped in the chat, to forms for these affidavits. Okay, next slide. Voluntary administration. This is for small estates, less than $50,000. It's the same. I'm just gonna like fly over this in the interest of time, but it's the same court process whether there's a will or not. It is an expedited process, and the forms can be completed online. In the New York Court's website, there's actually a form filler that can help you complete it. So again, voluntary administration is when somebody has less than $50,000 of property that's passing either under a will or through administration. And if they owned real property like land or a house or something like that, voluntary administration is not going to be something that you can use. This is for like bank accounts, investments, different things like that, so long as they're under $50,000. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Okay, probate and administration, again, just flying over this. In a nutshell, what probate and administration, so these are the processes, like I said, probate is if there's a will, administration is if there is no will. And these processes are for people who die with more than $50,000 of property. Like, in a nutshell, what this looks like is somebody is going to court with the will and submitting it to the court. The court will determine whether the will was validly completed. If so, they'll empower the executor. If there is no will, then the court is again looking at that list of priority people who can be the administrator, seeing where somebody is on that list, and then appointing them, empowering them. The administrator or the executor goes and collects the property. They put it into an estate bank account. They pay off debts that are part of the estate. So if the person who died had like medical expenses or, you know, different debts that they owed, taxes, things like that, the executor or administrator is going to pay that stuff off. And then once all the debts are paid and 7 months have passed, the executor or administrator is going to distribute the remainder. They'll either follow the instructions in the will, or they're going to give to the heirs at law, as you know was described in the administration slide. Okay, and they always have to account, the executor or administrator have to account to the beneficiaries. So we can go to the next slide. I'm just going to cover 1 or 2 questions because I know time is running out. Does a will, these are common client questions we get. Does a will avoid probate? No. A will has to go through probate. That's how it gets its power, is it has to go to court. Can a will control property in another state or country? So in another state in the US, you're going to have to take a New York will to that state and go through probate or whatever ancillary probate process they have there. In another country, a New York will is not going to control property in another country. You'll have to consult with a lawyer in another country. Okay, and unfortunately I have run short on time, but I think that the slides will be shared later, maybe. So we can go ahead. I'm just going to introduce our next speaker. Libby Vasquez is the Director of Legal Services at the City Bar Justice Center. And Libby, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you. Yeah, thank you guys for your time and attention, and get in touch if you have any questions related to estates or probate.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Thank you, Senator Krueger, for the invitation, and to her staff. And thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm going to speak about the City Bar Justice Center and some of the services that we provide. My presentation will not be in depth substantively, as the others have covered a lot of what I would be speaking about. So the City Bar Justice Center is the legal services arm, the free legal services arm of the New York City Bar Association. We have a small staff and we help a lot of people with the help of pro bono volunteers. We leverage the power of pro bonos, through all the large law firms in New York City. So that is a lot of what we do is work with pro bono attorneys to help our clients. And like the other presenters discuss, we do have limits to our income. We have income guidelines so that we're able to help people with limited resources for the most part. But I will also talk about the legal referral service at the New York City Bar Association, where you can call and get a referral for a private attorney if you need one. So what does the City Bar Justice Center do? We provide an array of services, including full representation in the areas that we cover, but we also provide a lot of advice and counsel, brief services. That means like we do limited work if we can help someone through those means, community outreach and education. We also have a social work component. And so we have 12, 13 projects, and I've asked for the link to this flyer to be shared so that you'll have this if you need it in the future. These are the different projects that the City Bar Justice offers, and I'll talk more about how you can get in touch with us if you need help. And today I'm going to highlight a few of these projects. All the projects are open to people of all ages, but I will talk about a few individually. Okay, so one of our most popular projects is our legal hotline. We have a legal hotline that's open every day. It's staffed by attorneys. And we do check income, but if you're slightly over income, we try to answer your question. The number is listed here and will be shared with everybody. And we also have an online application. So if you don't want to be on hold, you can send us an online application and we'll try to get back to you within 3 days. And so on the legal hotline, the most popular types of calls include calls on, family law and divorce, housing, landlord and tenant issues, all, full gamut, people in housing court, of people who have issues with their neighbors. So neighbor disputes, roommate disputes. We also talk to a lot of people who have consumer debt and are sued in civil court or being harassed by creditors. We also have a bankruptcy project at the City Bar Justice Center that does simple personal bankruptcy called Chapter 7 bankruptcies, and we are the initial place for you to call for that, as well as other types of civil court matters. Okay, so we also have a project that is basically it's basically run and done by trust and estates attorneys. So we only use trust and estates attorneys for this particular project, and what we offer is assistance in life planning documents. You heard about the life planning documents, wills, powers of attorneys, and healthcare proxies and other documents. We also do work in surrogates court. So again, life planning documents that you heard a lot about today, as well as help in the surrogates court of New York. The surrogates court is our probate court. And so we help people help themselves for the most part in surrogates court. We help them with the petitions that they have to file to probate a will, to administer an estate, to obtain voluntary administration. These cases are pretty simple. We don't have the resources to take on contested matters. But it's I think that it's a really needed service in New York. And so I'm happy that we're able to provide that. Okay, so go documents, and as I said, yeah. Okay, we also have an elder law project. And the elder law projects through volunteers helps people with life planning documents, that were mentioned previously by the presenters. So wills, powers of attorney, healthcare proxies, etc. Okay, so now a little bit about our legal referral service. So this is part of the New York City Bar Association. And what the legal referral service can do for you is if you call them, they can try to find an attorney or two that they can refer you to. And those attorneys have agreed to a $35 half-hour consultation for folks referred through the New York City Bar's legal referral service. Okay, and these attorneys are vetted. They're in good standing. Okay. As I said, it's a place where you can call to get a referral for a vetted attorney. They also have an online application, excuse me. So again, if you don't want to do this through the phone, you can submit an online application for assistance for a referral to a private attorney, and a legal referral counselor will get back to you. Okay, so if you want to learn more about us, please visit our website. Here's my contact information. Follow us if you want to on Facebook and other social media. Yeah, thank you so much. I think that I have probably a lot more time than I thought I would. So I hope that that the next presenter is ready. I'd like to present Michele Kirschbaum. Michele is the Director of Programs at the New York Peace Institute.
Thanks, Libby, and thank you, Senator Krueger and your staff for organizing this event, and also to all of you for coming here today. I am the Director of Programs at New York Peace Institute, and our tagline, "Let us get in the middle," is a reference to mediation, which is what we do. We help people resolve conflicts. I hope in our time together that you will come away with an understanding of how New York Peace Institute might be able to help you and get some basic information about mediation. So, New York Peace Institute is what's called a Community Dispute Resolution Center. And basically, conflicts are our business. We try to help people resolve conflicts, navigate through their conflicts by providing mediation services and other services. And the disputes that we help people with are ones that are filed in court, situations that might have been reported to the police, or interpersonal issues that are neither. We are funded mostly by the court system, and so all of our mediation services are free to the public. We also teach people how to mediate. We teach our own mediators, but we also provide training in mediation skills to attorneys, to teachers, guidance counselors, HR professionals, so that they can bring these skills to their own workplace. So what is mediation? Probably most of you know. I'm just going to go over some of the major points about it. It's basically a meeting or a series of meetings between people who are involved in some kind of a dispute, and their conversation is facilitated by a trained mediator. And there are a few standards to this process that make it really work well. One is it has to be voluntary. You cannot bring people together who don't want to talk to each other or who feel like they could be in danger. They feel if they're unsafe. So it has to be something that people want. Therefore, it's voluntary. The mediator is impartial. They don't take sides, they don't pass judgment, and their role is to really help people speak their truth to one another and to move towards trying to find a resolution on their own and to support them in making those decisions. The other important fact about mediation is that the conversation is confidential. People in mediation must be able to talk about their situation and be comfortable enough and not worried that what they're saying in that conversation could be used against them should the case go to court. So what's said in mediation is not admissible as testimony or evidence in a court proceeding. So what do mediators do? I think in order to really understand what mediators do, it's important to understand what happens to people when they're in conflict. I know that when I'm in a conflict, and from the people that I have worked with, it can be overwhelming. It can be all-consuming. It's the first thing you'll think about when you wake up in the morning and the last thing you'll think about before you go to bed at night. And it's something that some people talk to everybody they possibly can about this conflict that they're involved in. It can be overwhelming. It can be stressful. Conflict can have multiple issues and be really complicated. And people could feel like they're really stuck and there's no way out. So what do mediators do to try and help people in conflict? Well, the first thing they do and they learn is how to be active listeners. Mediators are trained to support people to tell their stories to one another, to share their feelings, and to talk about what they need to end the dispute. And what a mediator does is help get the message from one person over to the other, because these people in conflict are not listening to one another anymore. So the mediator is listening and helping to share information. Mediators also help ease tensions. By facing one another and being able to talk things out, that alone often can just ease up tensions in a conflict. For example, in an apartment with a noisy neighbor upstairs, life at home can become intolerable. And every time people see each other, they get tense, they get loud, they get annoyed, they get frustrated. But if you bring those people into a mediation to talk things out, often that alone can help ease up the tension, even if it doesn't resolve the matter. Another thing that mediators do is they help organize all the different issues into some kind of a workable order so that we can really talk about what's going on in a logical way, and we can help people brainstorm solutions that might be helpful. Mediators don't offer solutions, but they try to encourage people to come up with their own creative solutions, because people in dispute, they actually know what's best for them. So what kind of issues are appropriate and can be worked out in mediation? I'll tell you, almost any issue. Any kind of conflict often can be worked out in mediation. Conflicts within the family are very good to come to mediation. Now, those could be issues about the disagreement about the care of a loved one, conflict over custody and visitation, interpersonal disputes between family members over a variety of issues. I mean, we've mediated fractured families lately who are in conflict over their own political views, or just families who are not getting along in their living space. Housing issues are also really good for mediation. Issues between landlords and tenants about repairs or back payment of rent can all be brought to mediation. Conflicts with co-op board members or people who are sharing space and don't want to share space together anymore and want to figure out a way to literally break up their lease. Cases that are in court or not in court can be brought to mediation. Noise disputes, noisy neighbor next door. You don't have a whole lot of options about what to do about that noisy neighbor that's making life so difficult. Mediation is a good way to try to resolve that kind of an issue. We mediate a lot of civil court cases, especially small claims, those cases that are filed in court. Most of the time, those are diverted by judges to mediation first. Conflicts within the workplace between colleagues, between supervisors and employees, also good for mediation. We mediate educational disputes between schools and families of a child with a disability. We mediate criminal court cases. Typically, criminal court cases involving family members are sent to mediation for an opportunity to work out something rather than have a family matter prosecuted. We also mediate group conflicts, mediating disputes within communities, for example, how shared space will be utilized. And not on this list, but we do mediate surrogates court cases where surrogates court judges may refer some cases to mediation, disputes about the appointment of the administrator or other issues. Mediation works really well when the people know each other and they are motivated to work things out, because the alternative isn't something that's attractive. The alternative of moving out of your apartment or going to court or calling the police or just not having a relationship. If you have a pre-existing relationship, those kinds of situations can often resolve in mediation because the motivation is high. When people are in conflict, sometimes they just want to tell the other person how badly they've been made to feel, or the impact of that conflict, how deeply they were hurt, how miserable they're being made. And mediation gives them an opportunity to try to build up communication and trust when those have been broken. Mediation is a good option, and there's very little downside. There are a few times when mediation is not a good idea. When people's interaction is too volatile and they don't feel safe, or an order of protection is in effect, mediation would not be appropriate. We don't want to make anyone's situation worse. If there's domestic abuse or elder abuse between the parties, mediation may not be appropriate, because people need to be able to advocate for themselves safely in mediation, and with those dynamics, that may not be possible. We want to make the process of referring cases to mediation simple, so you can contact us online or by phone. And once a request for mediation has been made, our staff will contact the initiating party to find out more about the situation, to explain our process, and to answer any questions. We'll also determine if the case is appropriate for mediation. If not, we might try to give out other resources, such as for legal advice or counseling, if that's what people want. It's important for us to have contact information for the other parties in mediation, because we reach out to them as well, and we explain the mediation process and let them know that it's been requested. And if they're willing, we will set up mediation for a date and time that's convenient to all of the parties. Mediation can take place via Zoom or in person in our downtown office. If only one person is willing to come to mediation, we can also set up a solo session, which is an opportunity to meet one-on-one with a mediator to talk out the situation and brainstorm some possible solutions. To recap for you, mediation can really be an effective way to resolve a conflict for a variety of situations prior to going to court. It is really empowering. It can be much faster than going to court. It is free, and it can help restore relationships if that's what people want. We have some results from 2023 where of the 700 cases that we mediated, agreement was reached between 50 and 90% of the time. So thank you very much for listening. Please don't hesitate to reach out to me if you have a conflict that you would like our help with, or you'd like some more information. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michele. Now we're going to invite all of our speakers to come back on screen with us. And I'm going to see how many of the many questions we've been getting we're going to be able to answer. There are people who have typed in questions during the presentation. Some of them just got the answers right away. Some other answers were put up online in the chat. But again, I will try to get to as many as we can. So the first question is really related to income guidelines for any of your legal services. So I guess starting with one, the Bar Association, is there a cutoff of eligibility for Bar Association programs?
For the City Bar Justice Center, which is the free legal services arm at the New York City Bar, there is. So it's 200% of the poverty level for most of our projects. Some projects, for example, a project that helps people with foreclosure, right, of their homes, has a higher bar because people have to be able to afford a home and the expenses related to it. But it's about 200% of the federal poverty level, which is about $27,000 for a single individual in New York.
Thank you. And for the other groups, NYLAG, do you have an income cutoff?
Hi, Senator. It can vary by project, but it's around 250% for many of our projects, not all. So for example, we have some funding to serve Medicare beneficiaries and provide Medicare counseling. So eligibility for that project would be based on being a Medicare beneficiary. And we often are able to provide advice for someone who has more income or resources, but just advice and then a referral to to a private attorney. With that information, you can hire a private attorney with more confidence, I think.
And we know that several of you pointed to online resources and even forms that you can fill out yourself without necessarily needing an attorney. But there's always questions about how do you find an elder law specialist if you're trying to deal with assets and covering possibilities of, I guess, transferring or moving things around so you can be eligible for Medicaid and long-term care issues. Is there a resource guide for finding lawyers who you probably might not be eligible for free legal services?
Absolutely. Our general referral at the Evelyn Frank Legal Resources Program is to the National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys. So I can send this link to your staff, Senator. It's NYLAG for short, and there's a way to search for an attorney that way. And I think Libby was also talking about another way to find a vetted attorney.
Libby?
Yeah, so I spoke about the New York City Bar Association's legal referral service. And that link has been posted.
Oh, great. Thank you. Yes, we have an enormous amount of information being posted.
Yeah.
So keep looking at yours because we're going back and forth and trying to make sure we get you as much as possible. So thank you. Guardianship issues and APS. So I have this is a questionnaire. I have a sister who's under guardianship, but is being medically neglected by other family members and even I think by the guardian. What can I do?
So this is Erin Shahinfar from NYLAG and the Advanced Planning Practice. I think that's like going into legal advice territory. You know, I think you should speak with an attorney, and you can feel free to give our practice a call, and we can talk a little bit more about the specifics that are going on in your situation.
Got it. And I think you all did answer this one about, do you really need an attorney to create a will, or can you create one yourself? And I think several of you referenced online resources for that, right?
Not for a will. I
Not
didn't
for a
see
will?
one
Okay.
for a will. I heard one for healthcare proxy and probably another form, but not for a will. I didn't hear that.
Okay, so are there resources for wills, or do you really need to go and find yourself an in-person attorney?
This is Erin again, and Elisa, you can feel free to jump in too, because I'm sure you have opinions on this, but I think that I mean, this is an annoying lawyer answer, but it depends. Like, it really depends on what your assets are, what your financial situation is, what you're trying to pass to people. It is, like, in theory possible to prepare a will without an attorney. Is that something I recommend? Just generally, no, I definitely am not blanket recommending that.
And then there was someone who did ask about help for someone who isn't having a complicated situation with Medicare Advantage, but they didn't live in New York City, they lived in Long Island. So we did put up for that person, or for anyone else, that because we did a training specifically around Medicare options not that long ago, and we learned that there's a high cap program which is sponsored by state government to provide advice and review of insurance for older New Yorkers. I think pretty much in every county in this state. New York City has a wonderful high cap program through the Department for the Aging, but there's also high cap for every county. So we put information up in the chat about referencing to people outside of New York City for those services. And we also got questions about, do all these laws vary from state to state? And I think, yes, the answer, they do vary from state to state. So if you're not living here in New York, you probably have to do a little searching in the state that you are living in or looking for the laws for. I don't think there's a national directory on any of this, is there? I didn't think there was. But I do think that starting with the Bar Association in whatever state you're living in might be a good place to see whether there are specific resources for legal assistance. And there is the National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys that we've just put up. So specific to elder law, that might also be a good site to start with if you're living somewhere else. Who can I see to assure that my will prepared years ago provides the best for my children, taking care of them under existing laws? So is it reasonable to expect that you should review and update your will every X number of years? What do you all think?
A will doesn't expire. You can always, it's your option to consult with your attorney again, but it doesn't expire. And also there's something that Erin mentioned earlier that I wanted to touch in as well. When we were talking about whether we advise a lawyer or not in New York, and holographic wills are what people refer to as sort of like when you write your will on your napkin type thing. That's not honored in New York. So if you're like in a military situation, in an emergency situation, like that could be honored. But New York is picky about that.
Thank you. So I'm afraid more than a few people fall into these categories. So this person writes, I am kinless, but I need a healthcare proxy and an executor for my estate. How can I find someone to serve in those roles? And they don't have to be family. They can obviously be good friends. The concept of, I mean, do lawyers for people sometimes play those roles for them as well?
I know that, excuse me, I know that lawyers definitely can serve as, agents on a power of attorney, although typically they want to be paid to do that. I don't know about healthcare proxy, but I think Senator Krueger, like you said, it doesn't have to be your next of kin. It could be a friend, anybody over age 18 who you would trust to make those decisions. And then finally, if you don't have any next of kin to be an executor on a will, New York has something called the public administrator, and they would step in and be the basically executor or administrator if there is no next of kin.
And they
Go ahead, sorry.
I'm sorry, and they take a percentage. So similar to like an attorney when they might serve as your executor, the public administrator's office will take 5% of the first 100,000 and so on. Erin and I can back each other up because we both do similar work.
Fair enough. So people use the term power of attorney all the time, but apparently there's different kinds of power of attorney. Can you clarify what's a durable power of attorney? I mean, why do we need to understand all these different definitions?
I'm happy to try to take this one, Erin. So people often ask about the springing power of attorney versus the durable power of attorney. So a springing power of attorney tends to make people feel more comfortable because they think this power of attorney won't jump in until I'm sick, right? I don't have to worry about someone abusing it. What we like to think of is actually you want to have that durable power of attorney. You want to keep an eye on them because if they do something wrong, you can still revoke it. If you can't trust them while you can watch what they're doing, then how are you going to revoke it when they're doing wrong after you can't watch what they're doing? So we're okay with the durable power of attorney as the default. And some of our estates attorneys that we work with, since we work with a lot of private attorneys as well, what they sometimes advise is to put it away for a little while. You don't have to use it right away. So some attorneys you'll hear, use it right away so you don't have any issue using it. And other attorneys will say, well, if you're hesitant, put it in a drawer and let someone you trust know where it is, and then it'll be used when it's needed. So you'll get different advice from different attorneys, but ultimately it is an object of trust and you have to make that final decision.
Great. So this was a question. I must admit, I'm now an older New Yorker myself, and these conversation happens all the time. Should you pick an attorney, and I will extend this to, or a doctor who's your age or younger? And all my friends have agreed you pick someone younger. You don't want them to retire before you actually need them towards the end of life. You want an attorney who's going to be there probably until after you're gone. You want a doctor who's not retiring on you when you're 70 years old, because trust me, it's really hard to find new doctors who take patients when you're on Medicare. And you all are by then. So I would urge no disrespect for the doctors or attorneys older than me, but my gut is aim for younger. Does anybody want to disagree with me? Feel free.
I don't think we're in the practice of being biased against older adults in any way. So I'm just going to say that none of us is doing this by ourselves. We are all teams. We have older and younger people on all of our teams in the private practice world of doctors and lawyers and in the public world. So don't worry, there's someone older or younger on each of our teams, I bet. We're not alone in this.
So that's good for all your organizations. I'm not sure that is true for doctors in private practice or lawyers in private practice, but that's fine. And I certainly didn't mean to imply lack of respect for the skill sets of people who have been in their careers a long time. So after I get notes later hollering at me, that's what I meant. Okay, my mother is a senior citizen on disability receiving Medicare and Medicaid. Due to receiving an inherited IRA, we believe it pushes her over the threshold of Medicaid. Her monthly income only covers rent and daily living expenses. What should she do for health care? She's in need of home care and all kinds of other resources. So how do you handle being above a certain asset level and suddenly finding yourself not eligible for something you thought you were eligible for?
This is a really common intake that we receive at the Evelyn Frank Legal Resources Program, and I would encourage that person to reach out to us. The rules are very complicated on on each, eligibility for each type of benefit, whether it's Medicaid, whether it's food stamps, and so on and so forth. So we evaluate what the impact of that, we call it a lump sum, on each benefit might be, and we suggest it could be that the outcome is that it doesn't impact your mother's eligibility. Or if it does, we advise on sort of best case scenarios to reduce any gap in coverage and how to maintain eligibility. So I would encourage that person to reach out.
Is there some specific document that can protect one's finances from being counted for Medicaid? Did anyone talk about that?
We didn't talk about that. I am assuming that this person is referring to a trust, perhaps. Like if you place certain assets into certain types of trust, they may not be counted for Medicaid purposes. Tread very carefully in those situations. You are going to want to hire. This is not something legal services generally provides because our clients have fewer assets. You're going to want to hire an attorney who's very well versed in Medicaid rules. And there's something called a transfer penalty for nursing home care, and you want an attorney to understand all of your income and assets and to guide you through that process, because you have to make a decision about how you would pursue eligibility and what the impacts might be.
Another related question. So again, I'm making it me, but it's not me. So I live in New York, but years ago I set up a healthcare trust in Connecticut where my sister and her husband live and were administering it. But in the past year, I've had a stroke and cancer, and the bills are coming in. My sister is not well, and I'm having trouble gaining access to the funds. What can I do about that at this point now?
That's good. This is, I mean, Libby, do you want to step in? I see you nodding.
No, I was going to say this is pretty complicated, and I really think that you need to reach out to an experienced attorney in this area of law. And Rebecca, if your agency can provide this person with advice and guidance and a referral, you know, that would be great.
I think in this case, it sounds like a National Academy for the Elder Law Attorney type of referral. If that wasn't helpful, then I would say call our hotline to possibly get a more specialized referral. But I think it's possible even that you would need to hire an attorney in Connecticut, or to find an attorney who is barred in both New York and Connecticut to take a look at what your options would be to bring that trust possibly in front of a judge. This is all speculation, right? You really need some specific advice in that situation.
So we're talking about all these different documents that you should have and have available when things might happen, or when someone is helping you at the end of life, or when something's happened to you and you can't even follow up yourself. So, you know, these deeds, passports, insurance policies, estates documents, wills, living wills, health proxies. Where am I supposed to store them? I mean, there used to be banks that you would get a deposit box and they weren't that expensive, or sometimes free with checking accounts. But I find almost no New York City banks even offer deposit boxes. I mean, is it okay to just get like a fireproof box and tell everybody the key is hidden wherever? What do you recommend to people? Such a good question to me.
I don't recommend a safety deposit box to my clients, because family members will have to go to court to get into that safety deposit box once you pass away, to get to those documents. So yes, if you know, a fireproof safe is fine, a safe place in your home, and letting your relatives know where the original will is, and your documents. Some people want to give their originals to family members, you know, to their daughter or son to keep, but definitely not the safety deposit box.
Okay, thank you. That's an important thing. Yes, because I was thinking, well, nobody can even get them anymore anyway, but you're making a really good point about why it could be a real problem if you have to get into it and you're not co-signed as a person allowed to get into the box.
And if you're co-signed, you still have to go to court.
Really? Oh,
Yes.
okay. Yeah, no, we don't want to do that.
We don't wanna do that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Another person concerned about no one to be the healthcare proxy on life-saving procedures. Can your doctor be your proxy? Is that a bad idea?
If they are your proxy and they agree to that, then they can't be your treating physician. That would be a conflict otherwise.
Got it, okay. So we just have to do more to figure out how people can find someone who's willing to be a healthcare proxy, etc. I will say for anyone who's exploring healthcare proxy, life-saving, the living wills, I would recommend, I think you would too, be as specific as you want to be on what you do or don't want. Don't just be checking off a box. There's always sections where you can write in specific things you do or do not want to happen to you. And I can't emphasize enough how valuable it is for you to write that information down. And I know that most of the New York City hospitals will then tell you, if you want to file that with them, they attach it to, I guess what they're now called patient doctor portals, where all the information about your health care at that facility is recorded and accessible, but they can also attach your living will and healthcare proxy material. And I learned that when my own parents were both very ill and we were going back and forth to ERs, and realized, oh, wait, I don't have to remember to grab the document at the same time as I'm rushing to the ER to meet the ambulance there with one or the other parent. I can have that on file there. And that makes it so much easier, because then whoever is dealing with the immediate or emergency situation can simply call it up the same way they're calling up the other files on that individual's health records and history. So I would definitely encourage people, in addition to keeping it someplace where your family and loved ones can find things, previously on the metal box discussion, those documents are only useful if they're available at the time difficult healthcare decisions need to be made. So I would definitely recommend having it, in the hospital patient portal. I think that's what they all call them, even though they're different names of different hospital systems. Oh my goodness. So we actually are pretty much out of time. I want to ask just one more question, because I think it's a pretty common one. Excuse me, am I completely off schedule? No, I guess I'm still fine. I don't know if I am completely off schedule, but I'm going to keep going. If your spouse passes, are you responsible for debt on their credit cards that aren't in their name? And will you still be able to use the credit card if it's not in your name?
I can take this one.
Okay,
So you're not responsible, if you are not on that account. And I'm not, and by that I mean that you can have, your name is not, you did not sign an application for that card, and that card is not in your name. It could be
Yeah.
that you have that your spouse gave you a card, right? So you're an authorized user. So you have your own card under his account or her account, but you are not responsible for that debt, but you cannot continue to use that card if the card holder passes away. That's fraudulent.
got it. Okay. Thank you. Oh, yes. So good. My notes were wrong, and it had me closing at a earlier time than we actually are at. So we're still good. Let me just double check other questions that may have come in that I didn't get to. Oh. A long lost immediate relative has surfaced after many decades of absence of contact to his brother who just passed, and announced he will contest his brother's will, which was made 25 years ago. Oh, this is definitely going to need a lawyer. The will was made by an attorney and properly witnessed. What valid grounds could the brother have to contest the descendant's will? I'm going to say I've seen this movie, and I suspect that you're all going to say they need to get themselves an attorney to help work this out. Am I wrong? Nobody's
Not wrong. You're not wrong.
I'm not wrong.
They definitely will need to consult with a private attorney on this.
Yes, that's what I thought. I just assumed that was the case. Is it possible to claim a deceased remains that have been abandoned by the descendant's family? And at what point in time could this happen? I mean, I know the city of New York actually buries you after a certain amount of time, if nobody else has claimed the body. Is that my understanding correct? At least-
Yes.
That's correct. Yeah, I don't know the answer to this question off the top of my head, if anybody else does.
Yeah, I don't know how long there is before the city decides to just bury. I guess if you have legal status afterwards, you can have the body moved to another location. I don't think there's anything preventing you from that, but then you're in more complicated territory also.
Seen
Yeah.
a situation where it was quite a few months where the body was in the morgue.
Quite a few months?
Yes,
Okay,
there was-
within a few months. Got
Yeah.
it.
No, like, it was like 6 months. It was like
Oh,
a long
okay.
time, but this was like a pandemic related case.
Right.
I mean, a long time that.
Oh, right. In the pandemic, everything got sort of nightmarish with the, right, the sheer numbers of deceased with, yeah.
Yeah, so they seem to, because they got in contact with relatives, but it was difficult to get that relative close by and
Right.
to get them to sign off to someone else. And so they were very patient. If they get in contact with someone who seems to care about what happens to the body, they seem like they will hear it out and try their best.
I have to say, what is the MOLST and can you use that instead of an HCP? Someone better explain what that word is to me.
Most can only be done by a doctor. So people often have both. But
Okay,
we can't do a most.
lawyers can't do most. You can't do those on your own. And that's a more specific, detailed document about things you want to happen or not happen to you.
Let's look up what the acronym means, right? Because I'm not very good with acronyms.
I think there's also like certain conditions that have to be met before a doctor can prepare it. Like I think that, I mean, it's been a while since I read about almost, so feel free to jump in, anybody, but I think that it's, like somebody has to have like 6 months to live, I think, before a doctor will prepare a most for you.
Got it. All right, well, we'll all learn more about that. Oh, a medical orders for life-sustaining treatment. Thank you, Elisa. Okay, so I guess if you're in that kind of situation, you ought to talk to your doctor about what that is and consider whether that's something that makes sense for you. I am now, I think, pretty much done with questions. We did get a few housing law questions, but again, we just finished a 4-part series on housing law issues. So I'm going to refer people who thought they were writing a housing law question that we didn't get to watch the videos that we just completed from a week or 2 weeks ago on different housing law issues. Or you can call my office and we might be able to give you an answer to those. I want to thank profusely all of our experts here today. They were extremely helpful. And I really appreciate your showing up and participating with us. I think we had close to 200 people during a slightly earlier point in this video. You're wonderful. I hope you all have wonderful holidays. I want to remind people that there are some online legal resources that we are posting. 2 links specifically in the chat. The first is the Elder Law Answers contact information, which provides up-to-date information about critical legal issues facing older adults, and Law Help, which connects low and moderate income people with free and low-cost legal assistance and information. And again, whenever you are looking for something relating to being an older adult in New York City, please remember we put out an older adult resource guide from my office. The link is in the chat. If you want a hard copy of the guide, and it's pretty big, so you probably want a hard copy, you can email us at lkrueger@NewYorkStateSenate.gov, which is up on the chat now, or you can call my office and we'll mail you a copy. And it covers almost endless topics and possible resources, including many legal resources. I'm reading reports that COVID and flu rates are increasing in New York City. Of course, we older adults are more vulnerable than most. I got my flu and COVID vaccines in September, and I urge you to go ahead and do the same if you haven't done anything yet. And I want to wish you all happy holidays and a healthy new year, because while I feel like we've been doing 2 or 3 of these a week for a while, I think now we've completed the process for the remainder of 24. And we will be back with you with more valuable resource webinars starting in the new year. And again, thank you all so much. And thank you to my wonderful staff, without which none of this ever would have happened. Thank you.